So then we go over to players who I think are going to have some breakout seasons. Some of these I think are well-known commodities. I think that some of these are going to be some newcomers. First guy that I think is kind of a shoe-in to have just an absolute knockout season is Jeremy Bernard. I think that Jeremy Bernard is going to be stepping into a role with a quarterback that excels much more at throwing the ball downfield. I think that he also is going to be coming into a role where he has a guy opposite him in Ryan Williams that's going to be getting a lot of attention. And I think that attention that Ryan Williams is going to be bringing is going to free up Jeremy Bernard to have a lot of success. I think that Bernard has kind of gone under the radar this offseason and has gone kind of at a point where even though he was a starter all last season, came with Kalen DeBoer from Washington, was an elite receiver last season as well. Just he's kind of gone under the radar and hasn't been talked about enough. And personally, I think that Bernard is going to be somebody that has an absolutely phenomenal season. I would expect both Ryan Williams and Bernard to have over 1,000-yard seasons this upcoming season. So I think Alabama has 2,000-yard receivers. I previously mentioned, and this is going to kind of go into my prediction as well, I do also think that Ty Simpson is going to have a 4,000-yard passing season, and I would put it Ty Simpson to finish first, second, or third team SEC by the end of everything, right? I think that your top three in the SEC is going to end up being Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, and I actually think Ty Simpson, right? So I think those are going to be your top three. Obviously, Arch Manning is going to compete at that highest level. Surprise, surprise. Four of those teams are four of the top five that people think are going to finish in the SEC. A lot of that is because of them having some of the more known commodities at the quarterback level. Again, I know that Alabama's quarterback is not a fully known commodity, but again, I do fully trust in Ty Simpson. Some other predictions that I think, and some other guys that I think are going to have some really big seasons. I think that Bray Hubbard in a full season, obviously he came in and played a major role in Keon Sabb being out last season when he hurt his foot. But I think that Bray Hubbard in an entire season is going to be elite in the back end. I think that his ball skills and how well he plays, kind of that free safety position, being able to kind of lurk and just, read the quarterback's eyes and make a play on the ball, having 3 interceptions and just being the elite ball guy that he was last season. I think that he is going to have another breakout season. You could argue he had a bit of one last season, but I think he'll have another one this upcoming season. I would expect 3 to 4 interceptions for him this upcoming season. It would not shock me if he had more. I just think that the ball skills that he has and the role that he's going to play, on top of the fact that you already have the other elite defensive backs that we've already talked about in Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson and, Deshaun Jones or whoever you think is going to be that Husky. I think that Alabama has enough guys where Bray Hubbard's going to be able to have a very successful season. I talked about how I think he's a bit of an unknown commodity, but I do believe that Nikhai Hill-Green is going to have a breakout season, right? Even though he is a newcomer this upcoming season, I do think that he fits the role that we miss with Jihad Campbell, and I think that he's going to perfectly slide into that role. So I do think he actually has a phenomenal season. Just because he's an unknown commodity does not mean that I don't think that he's going to have that success. Again, I think that he has the success. I just felt like it had to be mentioned that he is an unknown factor this upcoming season. Like I said, I think that what we've seen out of what he was able to accomplish at Colorado, I think is going to play in what Kane Womack is going to ask him to do on that defense. I think he's going to slide into that linebacker role perfectly that we missed in Jihad Campbell. Do I think that they're different players in some ways? Of course. However, I do think that Nikhai Hill-Green is going to slide into that role, and I think that he's going to have a breakout season. I don't think that he's going to have quite the level of production that Jihad Campbell is, but I think he's going to be more than sufficient and have a phenomenal season and be a guy that every team has to account for when you snap the football, similar to what you had to do with Jihad Campbell this last season. From a pass rush perspective, I think that a guy like Quay Russaw is somebody that I'm expecting to have a big season. He's somebody that I think that has sat for the last couple of seasons. Obviously, he played, but I think that he's kind of sat behind guys and waited his turn. And I think at this point, he's going to be the guy that's going to have a breakout season from a pass rush perspective. I don't want to predict how many sacks he's going to have because, obviously you can have combo sacks where multiple guys combine and so many different things. So I'm not sure of an exact number, but I do think that Quay Russaw is going to be the guy on that defensive line that steps up and is able to have a successful season. I think that when you have these Alabama guys that are, have wanted to play for the state for so long, but are also just highly, highly talented guys that are, very successful and, have something to prove almost. I think that those are some of the guys that I expect to have some of the bigger breakout seasons. I think that Quay Russaw is a perfect example of that. I think that Quay Russaw is going to be the guy that, in my mind, him and LT Overton are going to be two of the bigger names when you're talking about a sack numbers that are going to put up some numbers that Alabama fans are going to be very, very happy with this coming fall. That's my major predictions. I think the only other, big prediction that I think I have is that I think that Alabama leads the SEC in turnovers. Turnovers forced. Right? I think a lot of that has to do with the depth that Alabama has on that defense returning. Alabama has an absolutely insane returning defense this upcoming season. Eight guys who started are back this upcoming season, and I think that is a number, on just the defensive side of the ball. I believe it's 14 overall with 8 on defense and 6 on offense. But you have, having those 8 guys returning on defense, and then also again, when you talk about a guy like Bray Hubbard returning, having played as much as he did with Keon Sabb being hurt last season. And, you got some guys, some additional reps that potentially would not have gotten them last season. And I think that in general, Alabama's defense is in a position where they are going to be very, very successful. I think when you combine that with the fact that Kane Womack's defense is known for forcing turnovers, I think that it's kind of a match made in heaven. It's going to be a perfect combination. I think that Alabama leads the SEC in turnovers forced. I think that a lot of that's going to be interceptions, but I do think that they lead the SEC in turnovers forced.